Statues on the Common. Anne Hutchinson wasn't the only strong woman to trouble John Winthrop and the Massachusetts Bay Puritans. Her best friend was a problem too. Mary Dyer was Puritan and pious. Winthrop called her a very proper and fair woman. That was when he first knew her. But Dyer followed the ways of Anne Hutchinson, and when Anne Hutchinson was cast out of Massachusetts, Mary Dyer and her husband, William, and other believers went with her. Later, Mary Dyer took a trip back to England and found other truths for herself. She became a member of the Society of Friends, the people who are known as Quakers. Quakers call their church services meetings. In a Quaker meeting, everyone is equal. Anyone may speak out, and there are no ministers. Now, in the 17th century, equality was not fashionable. Besides, Quakers refused to swear oaths of allegiance to anyone but God. But oaths of loyalty to king and country were expected in England and everywhere in the 17th century. You need to understand that the church and the government were all part of one package in the old world. It was the church that gave the king his right to govern. It was called the divine right of kings. It was the government that gave the church support and lands. That was the way it had always been. It seemed as if people like the Quakers wanted to mess things up. The Quakers believed in toleration, and they believed each person could think for himself. What happens if you let people think for themselves? Why, the next step might be for them to say that the king's church and the king's priests weren't needed. And Quakers did say something like that when they sat in their meetings without ministers. So maybe you can see why Quakers were hated and persecuted by the authorities in England. They weren't liked any better in the colonies. The magistrates of the Massachusetts Bay Colony passed harsh laws to keep them away, but that didn't stop them. Some Quakers seemed determined to be martyrs, and Mary Dyer was one of them. She came to Boston and was sent away. She came back. This time she was tried with two Quaker men, and all three were led to the gallows. The men were hanged, but at the last minute Dyer was put on a horse and sent off to Rhode Island. She came back again. Now, what do you do with a woman who cares so much about her religion that she will risk death to preach its message? You'd think the Puritans would have understood that devotion. Maybe they did, and that's what scared them. The Puritans tried Mary Dyer again. This time they offered her life if she would leave Massachusetts forever. She refused. Mary Dyer was hanged on June 1st, 1660, on the Boston Common in front of where the State House stands today. Her death was too much for some Puritans. In 1661, the law was changed. Today, statues of Mary Dyer and Anne Hutchinson can be seen on the Common.